and welcome to Matchmove for Production by VFX Tutors. I'm Josh, and in this video we'll be continuing the Sith project and shot S060. What we'll do first, we'll just play through the shots so we can see what we're going to track, then we'll open 3DEqualizer. So 3DEqualizer is opened. You should have a UI like this. If you don't, you can go to Environments and select Basic, and this will reset your workspace to a UI like this. So our first thing that we need to do is import our image sequence. So first of all, I'll go to my sequence 1 camera at the top left, and I'll go to the right where it says live action footage and select browse, and I'll navigate to my image sequence. So lightsaber, good plates, and these plates are actually 2K plates. If you select on, they'll show you the resolution. These are 2048 by 1152. If I select OK, that's now brought in our image sequence, and as you can see, it's quite dark because this image sequence has been transcoded to a linear color space. So if I go to my 8-bit color conversion, and I'll change my gamma to 2.2, and this will bring us back up to a usable color space. So now if we scrub through our timeline, it can be quite laggy, so we need to export our buffer compression file. So what I'll do first, I'll just save it. I'll just go to my file and I'll make a new directory where I'll save all my files. And I'll just call this the shot name, so I always know that this corresponds with that image sequence. Select OK. Okay, playback, export buffer compression file. And that was really quick that time, so I'll import that one in. And now I can press spacebar and it'll play through. So now what we want to do is we want to set up our lens. So if we go to our right, we'll have our focal length settings with our film back width, height, and focal length. So if you go to your data package with this plate, so we've got the lightsaber, it's shot on a 4K Blackmagic, we've got our sensor size, and we know what lens, but that's all we know for this shot. So we're actually working at a different resolution on this one, so this is the reason why I always only put in my film back height, because I always let the width be passive and figure out the correct aspect ratio to different resolutions. So I fill out my film back height. You need to make sure that you put millimeter so it converts it over to centimeters, and I'll leave this as 30 millimeters because I don't know what it is. So now I want to import my set geo in. So if I go to my point group, 3D models, right click, add new, import OBJ file, sorry. And if I go to my data, I go to my set geo, set scan, and I'll have a set scan decimated and a set scan. This set scan's quite high resolution, so we'll bring this one in because it's going to be our highest resolution one, and we'll probably work on the decimated one in Maya. So if I click OK, this might take a while, so I'll fast forward through this. Cool, so that's imported now. So if we go to F6, we can have a look at our model. And if we roll on our mouse click, we can see now we've got quite a high dense scan. So whenever we bring in scans like this, the first thing that we want to do, we select it and make sure that we check is reference only. This means that we won't be saving huge OBJs into our file. And we'll turn off performance rendering because that can get annoying sometimes. And I'll bring my alpha down. And we can now sort of see the area that we've been working in. So if I go to F5, I can center my model, press Shift and right click to zoom out. And and I can sort of hold shift and use my mouse to sort of get a very rough lineup of the position, and you can sort of see the outline. Cool. So we want to get a better line of this because we can't really see, so we'll bring up our alpha so we can see a bit more of these edges. And what we can do, we can go to our texture mapping on our model, select UV map, and bring in our texture from our scan. So if we click OK, and it doesn't look like it's done anything, so we have to turn off show lines, then show polygons. So now if we go back to F6, we can see that our texture has been mapped onto our scan. So we go to F5 and F2, sorry. So what I'll do now, I'm going to pick my first frame to line up on, because we can see everything, and it's probably just quite easy to make everything on the first frame. So I'm going to look at F2 and press F5. Then I'm going to flick between the two, and I'm going to pick points that I can see in both, and use those as my reference lineup points. So I can see this edge here, so I'm going to hold Control left click and make a tracking point, but I'm not going to track it. I'm just making a single frame here. I go to F5, I use extract polygon, and I'll select that area. So now if I go to F2, I can see it's pretty close. It's because this is only going to be a rough lineup, so it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. So we'll do that to other places in the plate that we can recognize. So I'll make a tracking point there, press F5, and I can see that is here. So I'll go to extract polygon again, select that area, go back to F2, I'll select some points over here, so Control left click on this bit here. You can see this green bush and this little right angle into the cliff. So press F5, select extract polygon, and you see it's got this really big polygon over this, because if I zoom out now, I'll probably deselect it. It's because it's got my ground there. So if I hold shift and left click, I can rotate that down now. So now if I zoom in, then extract polygon, now I'm selecting it into the right place. So I'll just keep doing this around the plate, places that I can recognize. So this bit here. So it's quite close, but it's just not on it. So it's just here. And that's actually done it again. So I'll right click, modify, survey free. And I'll hold shift again to rotate that down, because at the moment it was projecting onto the bottom of the plane. So I'll hold shift and rotate down, then extract polygon again. So now we've got a few up here. We want to get something on the ground. So if we hold shift and rotate down, press F2, and we'll try and find some bits on the ground that we can recognize. So we've got this sort of concrete patch here. We can sort of see that this dark bit here is this dark bit. So press F2, create a tracking marker there, press F5, extract polygon, sort of roughly place it there. Then we go back to F2 and F5. Just pick a couple more on this wall. Create a tracking marker, F5, extract polygon. So now if we press Alt-C, we can see that our lineups is quite off, and we can see that our focal length is completely wrong, and our deviation browser is really high. So what we can do, if we go to our lens, go to focal length, select adjust, then go to Windows, parameter adjustment window, and it should open this window. So what we do, I'll just change it to wide and select adjust. I'll transfer the parameters, and it sort of puts us around a 20mm mark. So next I'll just go to Fine, then change it to Adaptive. I'll clear that and adjust again, and it'll just do a better fine tune to that sort of focal length. I'll do that a couple times just in case it changes. I've closed it, sorry. Just do it a couple times, see if it changes. It's about the same. So we'll Alt-C, solve. Now we'll turn on our 3D models. If we go to our 3D model, turn on our show lines and turn off show polygons, now we can see our wireframe. So if we turn our models off, we can see that all these rocks are now lining up and everything's looking really nice. So we've got our lineup and we've got kind of a good estimate of our focal length. So now what we want to do, we want to bring in our lens grid. So now we can solve for our distortion for it. So if we right click on our cameras, add new reference camera, and double click on reference 2, and this will activate our reference camera. So if we go to browse, and if you go to your data package, go to lens grid, Sigma 1835, and turn off sequence view, and you'll be able to select the 20mm lens grid. So if you press F3, it'll go to our distortion menu, and we want to go to, we want to make sure that we change our 8-bit color conversion on this as well to 2.2, because this has also been transcoded to a linear color space. And if we just select our top left one, click and drag until we see those zebra lines, and it will snap into the corners. So now we want to do that for all three of these corners. So you should have something like this. Then just select snap, and now that snapped the distortion matrix to the grid. It's quite hard to see, but if I hold, so now we need to fill out this lens grid. So if I hold Control and press up, I'll start extending this column, and hold Control down, and it will start extending downwards. We need to fill out this entire lens grid, so I'll do Control left and Control right. And you can sort of see, if I press Control up, you can see that we've got some slight bits here that we want, but then it's automatically disabled these ones that have gone out of the range, which is fine. We don't want to be placing any of these points at guesstimates. We want it to be like 100% sure, then we won't have any problems. So something like this is fine. So now next thing we need to do is go calculate distortion and geometry. Then all you have to do is calc lens parameters, then set parameters and close. And now if you select this distortion box, you can preview the distortion. So now we're done with the distortion. If we go back to our sequence camera lightsaber, double click on it, we select our distortion, we can see it's now transferred over to the image sequence. So now if we go to F5 and press Alt-C, you can see that our lineup would have changed. So we just want to go around and double check that this is looking pretty tight on the contours of all the rocks. It can be quite difficult to see, but we can see all this sort of contouring around here is working quite nicely. All these edges are fitting really well. And you can see the contours around all the rocks here. So I'm going to store my pose. Then the next thing I'm going to do is select all my points, right click, modify, survey, and survey free them. Then I'm going to go edit, project points on 3D models, and keep projecting until they're all projected. Zoom in. Now press Alt-C. Now that's completely locked that camera into that position. So if we right click over in our point browser, add new point set, we'll call this SF for single frame. Select all our single frame points, middle mouse click them under the group, open the group up, and we can view, hide the selected points, but now we also need to make sure that we go to right click on them, modify, calculation, disable them. You need to make sure that your single frames are always disabled, otherwise it will screw up your camera solve. So now we've got our lineup that's locked in, we've done our distortion, we can go to F2, and we can start tracking points. So if I go control left click and create a tracking marker, then I can just gauge marker and track. Then I just want to do this around the plate with a good spread of points, so control left click to make a tracking point. Control left click. And there's plenty of stuff to track, so you shouldn't have any problems with any of your tracking markers in this. Not even really having to adjust the sizes of them. So now we've done some on the walls, do some down here. So now we'll do some on the ground. Pick some of these points. I'm just going to resize because there's a lot of similar sort of patterns. Let's get some of these flowers. We want a good range of points for foreground, midground and background. Let's get this rock back here. Cool, so if we select all our points, we see we've got a pretty good spread. Maze has got an empty patch here, so what we'll do, we'll just track something down here as well. Cool. So if we go back to our first frame where we did our lineup, press F5. Now if we select all our points, edit, project points on the 3D models. Oh no, sorry, cancel that. Project points on 3D models. We've got 7 of 13, so we'll just zoom in and project points again. Got 9 of 13. We'll just keep zooming until we get them all. Three of 3, just one more here. Zoom in a bit more, project models. Okay, we'll just leave that. It's been quite stubborn. So now we'll press Alt-C to solve our camera. And we'll use result. We click View All. We can see, if we press play first, we can see we've got a pretty good solve, but something's kind of funky going in our deviation browser. Even though it's still a good solve, we can sort of investigate this. So if we select our deviation browser, we go to Show Point Deviation Curves, active points only. We see all the 2D tracking markers and what they're sort of doing, and we can instantly see this one here is causing us a lot of problems. So if we click on it, right click, modify, survey, and approximately survey, this will give it sort of projection and sort of a looser area. To sort of, it could be in that area instead of projecting it directly onto that polygon. So if I press Alt-C, you see it's made it a lot better. We'll just do these other ones as well. We'll just approximately survey some of these ones that seem to be causing us problems. Right click, modify, survey, approximately surveyed, Alt-C to solve. That seems to have fixed it quite well. So if we go full frame, play for it, that looks really good. So what we'll do now, we'll just do one more final focal length adjustment, and it's barely changed it, so we'll press Alt-C. Now we've got really good solve for our camera. It's all working really well with the layout, so what we'll do, we'll just tidy up this. So if we right click, add new in our point browser, point set, we'll call this solve, click OK, then we'll just select all our points, hide it under here. So now we're actually done with the camera part of this, so we can save it. So make sure before you save, you definitely have this scan geo as reference only, otherwise you'll make a file that takes a long time to open. So we'll just go 3D4, save project as, and I'll just overwrite my previous file. So our next step is to bring in our OBJ for our lightsaber, so we can do the animation on it. So we can hide this set scan so it doesn't get in the way in show 3D model. Right click on our point groups and add new point group, and now this should have made a point group 2, and it automatically changes it to an object group. So if I double click on that, this is now our active group. So now if I open up that little triangle, go to 3D models, right click, import OBJ file, and go to our set geo lightsaber, and you'll have lightsaber scan geo. Click OK, and now that's imported in. So if you click center models, you can see now it's appeared here. So if we shift right click, and we can keep right click dragging till we sort of see it. So if you go to 3D model, select your 3D model in your point browser, object browser, and you can bring down the alpha, and you can change it to reference only as well. So if we zoom in on this, shift and left click, we can sort of see the details that we want to sort of line up to. We can see this little red cable is here. So I'll start using my lineup points. So I'll just select extract vertex, hold control, and left click on a part that I can recognize. That's about there. Then I'll do the same for lots of other areas. So I'll select extract vertex, hold control, click and drag to parts that I can sort of recognize. You can see it's sort of going funny because it can't quite figure out the depth. But if we just keep doing this, the more points that we can see. So Alt left click to deselect, then select extract vertex, then hold control and left click, and that will make a lineup point. And you can see now it's starting to come in a little bit tighter. We'll just keep doing that. Extract vertex, hold control, left click. And try and get this as tight as possible. It's quite rough at this end. So we can turn our 3D model off and sort of get sort of a rough guesstimation of that lineup. So we just want to keep tweaking this until we get our best sort of lineup. And you have to go with the best fit, because with a scan like this, everything might not fit perfectly. So you want to go with the majority fit. So what I've done here, I've got what looks like pretty much 90% of it fitting quite nicely, apart from this end, which kind of looks, it's not very pretty down this end because it's kind of all lumpy. If we turn our 3D models off, we can sort of almost see this corner here. We just have to accept that maybe it's just decimated around this edge, as long as these sort of side bits are lining up. Cool. So we'll store our pose now, and what we'll do, we'll just start tracking points. So if we go back to F2, so I've probably not picked the best frame to line up on because I picked 110. You might want to pick like the first or last frame, but it's fine. So now we're going to start selecting points to track. We want to pick like quite nice places to track that are quite easy to sort of recognize. So it's the exact same method as doing the cameras. It's gauge, marker and track. And you want to do this to a nice good spread of points. So that will go all the way to the end. So make sure that your tracking markers always go to the end, or you end them. And if they stop, it might be because your search area is not big enough. So now that's finished. There's quite a bit of motion blur in this, so you might get some bumps and lumps in your tracks that we can't really do much about. But if we get a good all-round sort of camera track, and a good all-round sort of track from our 2D points, it should be okay. Motion blur can be a bit of a pain sometimes. Pick areas that we can identify it a bit easier in. So we'll just look through. Usually you don't really want to track highlights, but sometimes you don't have a choice, because highlights will just shift with like the movement of things, so you'll effectively be slightly tracking something that's moving, but bit here as well. We kind of seem to be bunching up our points, which is not great, so we'll start finding other areas to track. Just double check that that finger didn't move that room. No, it's all fine. So it's quite dark down here, so if we go to our windows, image control windows, and you should have this window pop up. So you'll have to select image controls enabled and color controls enabled. And the only ones I ever really use is the contrast and gamma. That will get your best results, I find, because you only need to tweak them a little bit, and then you've got some contrasting points that you can track now. So we'll try and get something down here. You might have to do a little bit of manual tracking on this. I can't imagine we'll have to do too much. So where it's slipped, we'll just gauge marker. We'll just keep readjusting our tracking box. Gauge mark and track. So if it's not tracking at all, we might need to help it. So that looks like the search box isn't big enough, so if we go gauge marker, track, just change it. So we'll have to manually track this, so we're going to use our nudge points tool on our number pad to sort of nudge it into place. So I'm just looking at my point, and make sure you got center 2D on, otherwise this won't work. Just making sure that my 2D track is staying in the right place with nudging it with my number pad. This is where we'll have problems with motion blur, where you can't really see what's going on. So you'll probably get bumps in your deviation browser from this. see. So I'm just using my number pad to adjust it. I might be able to track it now. So we're definitely going to have some sort of funky bits in our deviation browser from there, but we can come to that when we start solving. So we want to try and get some other places in here. So let's try and get this bit here. Just resize our tracking box. Gauge marker and track. See, it's flung off, so we'll go back to the point where it's working, go for it frame by frame. So it comes off here, so we'll just use our nudge tool and just click on it to bring it up closer. Then we'll use our nudge tool to nudge it into place. Left click to make a keyframe in place, just click and drag it. So we're going through that motion blur bit again. So this will definitely, when we solve this, we'll see this exact point in the deviation browser of where that motion blur is. So we'll just come to this point where it's sort of clear. We'll gauge marker again and track. Hopefully we'll be able to track the rest of it. Now we've got 2 points down there. That should help with that end of the object track. So maybe we can get... We'll open up, see if we can get some detail at the top here. Oh, image control window. So we can sort of pick up these edge marks here. We can give it a go. Not too confident that it'll work, but it might be alright. I think we've got enough points to solve, but we want to make sure that we're on a frame that's good as well. So let's try that. So it might be getting interrupted by too much of the highlights here. Let's try this one up here. Oh, let's remove that keyframe there. Gauge marker and track. So let's track that bit up there quite nicely. Let's probably come off a little bit on that sort of jump there. See how it jumps off. So we'll just use our nudge tool on a number pad, sort of adjust this. Just going through keyframe by keyframe, making sure the track is staying on point. Little jump there. Looks like that should be fine. So let's turn our image controls off so we can go back to normal. If we press F5, we can go back to our lineup point. So it should be signified by a red key where we stored the pose. So now if we select all our points, select edit, project points on 3D model. We've got 7 of 8, so we can select the one that hasn't been projected. Where is it? And we can zoom in, edit, project points on 3D models, and now that's projected. So now if we press Alt-C, select use result. So now we've got some, it's sort of working. So if we full frame, press spacebar, we can see that we've got animation and it's working fairly well. But in our deviation browser, we've got some crazy stuff going on. It kind of looks like it might just be because things are projected in the wrong space. So if we go right click, modify, survey, approximately surveyed, and Alt C again, that should bring it down. You've got a couple points here. So if we select all of those and change them to approximately surveyed, press Alt C, we're going to see what that does. Let's actually put those ones back on exactly surveyed. So if we actually see what's going on here, select that point, F2. See what happens if we survey free that. It could just be from the motion blur, it's going a bit funny. Just leave that approximately surveyed. So our problem points are these ones down here, where we had to do some manual tracking. There's quite a bit of motion blur in there. But if we press our spacebar and just look at our animation, let's have a look at full frame. So I think we've got a pretty good deal. It does look like it's more probably some of the tracking is probably slipping on the motion blur, but it's looking pretty good. It looks like it's popping off here, but that's just from the motion blur. There's nothing we can do about that. Cool. So we can just save this. So if you go 3D for save project as, just overwrite it. So we can go back to our first point group and turn on our show our 3D model again, and select our lightsaber, and we can go to our 3D model tab and we can just like change the color if you like, just so we can sort of, there we go, nice pink. And if we press spacebar, we can see our camera track's working really well. And now we can also see that our object track's working really well. So if we replace this lightsaber, it will sit nicely in the hand. So our next step will be to export out our camera. So if we go 3D for export project, Maya, change our start frame to 1001, and make sure you've got export no 3D models at all. So we don't want to be exporting any of them in this camera folder. So we'll export file, and we'll call this lightsaber cam. Then we'll export our distortion node by going to File, Export, Nuke LD3D for distortion node. Select file name, and we'll call it the same. Call this Nuke LD node. Select OK. So now we need to export our lineup for this lightsaber. So if we actually go to frame 1, then we know our lineups at frame 1. We go to F6, go to 3D models and export 3D model as OBJ. Select browse. Then we'll just call this lightsaber SFLUP for single frame lineup, VO1. We'll click OK, and that'll export that out. So So now we've exported our camera, our distortion node, and our lineup for our geometry. Our final thing to do would be to export out our undistorted plate. So if we go to 3DE4 and run warp 4, you should have this window open. So we go to the right and select save destination footage, select browse. We'll go to our destination folder and I'll make a new directory up here and I'll call it UDP for undistorted plate, and I'll call it the same name. I'll put UDP so everyone knows that's an undistorted plate. Dot 4 hashes. .exr. The 4 hashes signify warp 4 to render out an image sequence. We'll click OK, and I'll also do a half res, so it's not a full res plate in Maya. So now I'll select render, and you should start getting green bars. So now I go File, Close, Exit. So now we're done in 3D. Our next step would be to go into Maya, import our camera in and sort our cameras out and sort out our animation for our lightsaber with our object track. So if you guys like this tutorial, hit that like button and subscribe for more like this.